Come
on, we need Moshe to be.
Why? We've got good stuff coming.
Yeah. Every day is exciting.
Some dafim are more exciting than others, right? It's not about that.
We had the Gemara. You're not allowed to say shmuz who know, shmuz who ain't know. Remember, words in this.
You didn't really mean it.
Come on, we need Moshe.
Right, who's that? Yehuda, I think Yehuda's on. Second. Wait, one more second. It's put me. I know that this is something easy to fix. That's you're doing it.
Oh, you want to get you in the middle?
Yeah, it's easier.
It seems out talking.
We need a MacBook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can have a MacBook there.
Why am I now twice? Doesn't matter. Okay, why am I Moshe Niski here, Moshe Niski there?
What?
Doesn't matter. I don't mind being twice. Oh, now Levi's on, Yehuda's on. Oh,
Tell Levi he's lost his job.
Levi, unfortunately, your tethering is not working. You know why it's not working? Since you're not coming.
No.
So therefore,
Who are you tethered to now?
what happens is the technology is refusing to work if you're not around.
If you don't be careful, I'll have to come.
Yeah, you have to come.
There's no COVID in there, you don't worry.
There's a marshal. I just say very, very quickly. Get such chizuk from it, okay, if you like it. One Brachas tells us that if you see a place where Klal Yisrael had a miracle, you have to take a special brachas. If you go to the place of Kriyas Yamsuf, you say, Baruch Shasol Avesinu Neis V'Mokim Hazeh. If you go and find the stone that Og Melech HaBashan tried to throw on us, or you should have ever seen that stone, that Og Melech HaBashan?
Never seen it. No.
If you were to see it, there's a special bracha you have to make. But if you see the stone that Moshe Rabbeinu sat on when we were fighting Amalek, you make a bracha. Moshe asks an obvious question: the stone that Moshe Rabbeinu sat on had nothing to do with anything. It happened to be. Oh, says the Mashal.
Same as the Padanaram.
That's right, by Binyamin. The Chizkuni says that the Pasuk says that 12 sons were born to Yaakov in Padan Aram, only 11. The answer is he davened for the 12th in Padan Aram. Says the Mashal, it's like. So I said it over. So it's like this: that if you go to the factory now, they're creating vaccines to this illness that might one day come called COVID. And what happens is, so if you were to go there, you might say, "Thank you, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, for what's happening there? They're just creating the vaccine." The answer is the place they're creating the vaccine. That's the place where the Yisroel is coming from. For those who are concerned about these kinds of things. It's the same place. If you sit on, you see the stone which been davened, so that's the place where the vaccine was being created, and therefore you say Baruch Shashem.
YouTube.
Why? They've not heard about it yet on YouTube about COVID. I'm sure they're not that updated. YouTube is a very why? Because they don't hold of you. They don't. Oh, they do. Okay. We're up to Daf Ein with Beis 4. It's a very big marshal, very, very serious looking marshal. So this Beis Medrash, can you see millions of vaccines being created, hundreds of panosas being built, millions of people getting better? No, you can see, you can look around. This is the factory because this is Beis Medrash. Okay. So every Yom Tov, besides Pesach, where you have to bring more, there were 3 korbanos that you had to bring. What were the 3 korbanos? Chagiga and Ola Sviyah. Ola Sviyah would go on the Mizbeach, you got to eat nothing of it. And it was basically a thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for having this chus to sing. Shami Chagiga, because the Torah says Chag Hashem, which the children's translate as you should have a festival, which actually the Gemara tells us means nothing other than you shall bring a korban to Hashem. So every Yom Tov you have to bring a Shami Chagiga and a Shami Simcha. Yes, they put that in the very considered like in a kudah. Shami Simcha is a mitzvah to be happy. Only Chazal told us that the correct way to be happy is to eat meat of a korban. That is the only way to be truly happy. Therefore, you have to bring Shami Simcha. If for argument's sake, let's say you bring a Shami Simcha and you invite me to eat, do I have to bring a Shami Simcha? No. Because why am I used with his? Because I'm getting the simcha. If let's say he was a Shami Chagiga, do I have to know Shami Chagiga? Yes. Okay.
Why do you need it? Like this Shami Simcha, if you brought the Chagiga?
Yeah, the answer is that the Shami Chagiga has run out. Let's say Shami Chagiga, you've got a big family or you bought it. Oh, We mentioned before that on Erev Pesach you got 2 extra kabbanas, Chagigas al Basa and the Korban Pesach, right? Now-
Is it separate mitzvah? When you do oil Lego,
Yes.
is the mitzvah to then bring the korban?
It's a separate mitzvah. There's a few
There's
mitzvahs. It's all
mitzvahs
separate.
different.
This is Ram counts it separately in the 630. There's the Omar Ola, Omar Balaza. I'm adding with base 4 lines from the bottom. Shalom Shashachtam Me'ev Yom Tov. Here we're referring to somebody decided during the year to designate. Here's a sheep. I designate this sheep to be a Korban Shalomim. Why? To say thank you to Hashem. And then I go on Erev Yom Tov and I shecht it. So I come, I have Shavuos, I have Sukkot, I have Pesach, and I shecht it. I'm not done either. Not Shami Simcha, not Shami Chagiga. Why not? Mishum Simcha Dechsiv Zovachta Vesomachta Boinon Zvicha B'Shah Simcha Anala from Udalef. The Pasuk says Bezovachta Shlomim Bo'ochalta Shom Vesomachta. We darshan from the way the Pasuk is said that the mitzvah of Shami Simcha can only be Mekuyam if you shecht it B'Shah Simcha. This is the topic we're going to be spending most of the day on. And this is the main Nakuda. That means, logically speaking, would you say that you need to shecht it B'Shah Simcha? The answer is no. Why? Because the mitzvah is to eat Shami Simcha on Yom Tov. If I happen to have a korban left over from before Yom Tov come before, because a korban can only be eaten for 2 days, 1 night. But if I shecht it to the Yom Tov, there's no reason why I can't come out to Shami Simcha on Yom Tov. But he's mechadish a new din, v'zovachta v'somachta, you have to shecht your Shami Simcha on Yom Tov.
Which is the opposite yesterday.
No, I don't remember saying
You know,
opposite.
yesterday you did say you
Right.
you could bring it as a showing.
Oh, this next one. Yeah, that you're right. We said that the ikka problem of the fact that you promised it, that's not a problem. Which is the other problem. Why not Yotze Chagiga top line, Aleph and the top line? That is because what you just said. Why can't Yotze Shami Chagiga? Anything that you're obligated, you can't bring from a chul. So if you're mechuyev to give it, for example, let's say you're coming up to Purim, and you give Matanas Levyonim for your Maisa money. Have you done the right thing or the wrong thing? The wrong thing. Why? Because Matanas Levyonim is a Davar Shebachayva. Davar Shebachayva has to come from a new source of money and not. Okay. Says the Gemara, the Eiken Chiddush was not the Chagiga, because that the Gemara never argues about, never discusses. The Eiken Chiddush is that you're not, it's a Simcha. Lema Messiah. Vayisa ach sameach, you shall be happy. Now, where do you have the pasuk that says v'samachta b'chagecha? So, what's the ach sameach coming to include? The Rabbi is the Yom Tov Ach in the Simcha that you have to be happy on the last night of Sukkot. That's the night of Shmini Atzeres. Let's see the Rashi. If you've got the koach to see it, it's the last of the wide lines at the top of the page of Rashi. The Rabbi is the Yom Tov Ach. Bein Simcha le'achilas shlomim. Simcha is making shlomim. Yom Tov Ach in Gufei Loy. The last day of Sukkot, there's no mitzvah to be happy. On Shmini Atzeres or Eretz Yisrael or Chutz La'aretz, it's called Simchas Torah. There's no din to be happy. Why? There's no mitzvah to be happy on Shmini Atzeres. That's what Rashi passes. We look in Tosfos. Tosfos is the second to bottom Tosfos. Tosfos asks it later. And Tosfos gets upset, Kosher Rivo, and he argues with Rashi. And the fascinating thing is that Rashi in Sukkah says Mefurish. Remember the Rashi in Sukkah? Rashi in Sukkah says that everybody agrees there's a Chiyuv Simcha on Shmini Atzeres. The only question is the night of Shmini Atzeres. So Rashi contradicts himself. And the Ma'aseh we pass not like this Rashi, we pass like the other Rashi. There is a Chiyuv of Simcha on Shmini Atzeres. Why Rashi said here? It's like okay. So there's a mitzvah of Simcha the night of Shmini Atzeres. The first night, Ach is always memayet. Ach limits, but so Vayisa Ach Sameach is to tell you have to be happy, but Ach is coming to exclude. Chilek. Now, the Torah uses 2 expressions. One expression to include Simcha, one expression to exclude Simcha. And we darshan that you have to be happy the last night of Sukkot, not the first night of Sukkot. My time. What's the svar? If there would be a mitzvah the first night Sukkot, and to be happy, and how are you happy nowadays? How are you happy ever? Shami Simcha. Now, Shami Simcha, you can never do it first night Sukkot. Why? If you shecht it on Erev Yom Tov, it's Zvicha Shel B'Shas Simcha. We said that you have to shecht it at the time of Simcha. And you can't shecht the korban at night. So therefore, maybe that is the reason why you can't be Yotza. There's no Chiyuv of Simcha first night Sukkah simply because it's impractical. Says, well, no, that's not the reason. Because the Tani time, Ma v'yisa leVabba yisa leyom tov achron u'lo yitza leyom tov rishon. Ma b'ni leyom tov achron she'esh simcha lefonov u'moitza ni leyom tov rishon she'esh simcha lefonov. The last night has days of joy before. The first night doesn't. So it's more mistaber to include the last night than the first night. Let's go very briefly again. The Eike Chiddush of this Gemara, which we do not paskin like, by the way, that you can't be Yotzei Shalmi Simcha if you shecht it Erev Yom Tov. Shalmi Simcha have to be shechted on Yom Tov. That's the Eike Chiddush. We tried to prove it from the fact that there's no mitzvah of Simcha the first night Sukkot. What's the logic? Why is there no mitzvah? The Torah says, "Vayisach Sameach." There's a chiyuv yes be Simcha, a chiyuv not be Simcha. The answer is that because the first night is impossible. Says the Gemara, no. The reason is, of a different logic, the first night you haven't yet had Simcha before. If last night you have, so therefore we were mad with the last night.
So what's different when you shech it? It shouldn't be when you eat it. That's how simple.
Oh, so he answers the Zolvachto, the Somachto, the fact that they put them next to each other to teach you that even when you shecht it, it has to be B'Shas Simcha.
Last night doesn't matter.
That side doesn't matter because you're shechting it Erev, you're shechting on the last day of Chol Moed Sukkos, which is a time of Simcha, and then you're eating it on Shmini Atzeres, that doesn't matter. Now, a couple of small points. The answer is, all nights, by the way, you chayav simcha. The only night you're not chayav simcha is the first night sukkahs. Just be aware. So, for example, that Kibida would be the Gabo Imachiv to eat meat the first night sukkahs. Only the first night you're potter. All the other nights you're chayav simcha.
It's the same like the Seder night, the first night.
Yeah,
That's the difference. That's to eat matzah, to eat challah, etc. But to eat, but not mitzvah of simcha, right? So it comes out that Tis says it very, very short, the second Tis. Another thing is, Tis asks a kasha, and a very strong question, so I thought maybe someone would ask, that if indeed we paskan, but you have to shech b'shas simcha, then in fact it's impossible to ever have simcha first night sukkahs. Because how would you have simcha? You can't shech at night. You can't shech at the Erev Yom Tov. It's impossible. And if that's the case, the Torah does not need to tell me, Vayisa ach sameach, and the ach is coming to be mamayit. Without that, it's coming to. This whole cheshbon how you would work it out otherwise. Okay, I'm going to it again. Let's go very briefly. According to Ula, in the name of Abelazar, you can't be Yotzei Sham Simcha unless you shech them on Yom Tov. The Maskon of the Gemara Paskins that every night of Sukkot is a mitzvah of Simcha, and every night of Pesach mitzvah of Simcha. The exception is the first night Pesach, the first night Sukkot. Most of Yosef, Chagigas Abasa Yotzei Ba Mishum Simcha. You are Yotzei Mishum Simcha. Ein Yotzei Ba Mishum Chagiga. It says Mefush, the Chagigas Arbasa, which is a special call when you're being with the Korban Pesach, you can be Yotze with it. Simcha is the vaya, not like what we just said that you have to shech the Shas Simcha. We're talking about where you never shecht it on the 14th, you shecht it on the 15th. That means you designated it as a Chagigas Arbasa, but you never used it as a Chagigas Arbasa. What did you use it for? You used it for the next day. So therefore, since you shechted it on the 15th, it's okay. Who was the one who told it to us? Ben Tema. Rashi points out it's the Beis, which were Ben Tema quoted yesterday, all the chiyuvim of Ben Tema, Chigas Abasa. Ben Tema, Apostle of Belina. If you shechted it on the 14th, by the time it would come to the 15th, according to Ben Tema, if you remember yesterday we learned, Ben Tema holds it's possible. Shmaminos. We're talking about the Chagigas Abasa, which is shecht on the 15th. Because if you shecht on the 14th, everybody agrees it's no good. And that's what we said yesterday. That if you shecht the Chagigas Abasa on the 15th, then Shamei Chagiga, you're not Yotze. Why not? Because you designated as Chagigas Abasa and you got a new Chiyuv Chagigas Chamishosa. The Shamei Simcha, you are Yotze because you shechted it b'Shas Simcha, and it is a common Simcha. Mosivava, I had about Simcha, the first mission, the fifth perk of Sukkot, Shemoina. There's a mitzvah to do Simcha all 8 days of Sukkot. If you need to shecht it in this Yom Tov, you won't find it. Why? If the first day Sukkot is a Shabbos, so when are you going to shecht the Shabbos Simcha? You can't shecht it on the Yom Tov according to Ula. Why not? Why can't you shecht it on the Yom Tov according to Ula? No, why can't you shecht it on Erev Yom Tov? Why? It's not the time of Simcha. You have to do Zvicha b'Shas Simcha. You can't shecht it on Shabbos because it's not Derech Shabbos. So the first time you go to Shechted, the second day Sukkot, the first day Sukkot is Shabbos. Bishop Professor, the second day of Sukkot is a Shabbos, not a problem. Because you can Shecht on the first day Sukkot and eat it for 2 days, it's not a problem. If the first day Sukkot is a Shabbos, you're going to have a major problem. How are you going to do Simcha the first day? We always been on to Simcha Simcha. It's in the Sagin to Meshkachas or the Shiva. Okay, Chayam to Rishon to Shabbos. Omar, I want to break down Yehuda. The Samcha B'Sir Gonim. Every Yom Tov you have to bring korbanos, chatos, and others, and the Kohanim would get to eat some of the meat. So that's the Simcha. Says the Gemara, Robert Sheit Shuvas B'Tov. I have 2 questions. Choda the Sir Golim, Chayne Cholim, Slin Cholim. Can you imagine? Toli, you ready? Sure, you ready to eat raw meat? When it comes to Shabbos, which is Yom Tov, you have to bring, wait a second, Shabbos, which is Yom Tov, you have to bring chatos of Yom Tov, right? Now, the chatos of Yom Tov, what's the din? So you're going to be eating raw meat, can you imagine? You have to, because you can't roast it because it's Shabbos. You can't wait for the next day, why not?
Got a name for it in the wider world.
What?
Blue.
I don't know. I'll
Where?
find out. Give me a second.
Biltong.
No, it's blue.
Blue? Blue meat?
Yeah, they stick it on the
Because it's all
grill for about 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't even do that.
So Gemara says, Sheit Shuvas of Choda, this is going to have Sin Cholim, B'Simcha B'Chai Leker. There's no Simcha in eating more meat. How would the Yidden be happy? So when I asked the Kohanim, glad they have got a lot of Kohanim, but how would the Kohanim, how would they solve it? Elamar Papa Mesamchim B'Sus Nekiyav Yain Yashom. Says the Gemara, indeed, if the first day Sukkot is a Shabbos, if the first day Sukkot is a Shabbos, how are you going to be happy all 8 days? How is it possible? How is it possible? How is it possible to be happy for 8 days? Says the Gemara, with new clothes, nice clothes, v'yain yashin and old wine. I decided for a change to read it out to you, something I just quote off by heart. This every single year becomes a shtickle discussion. Every Pesach and Sukkot, my household. One year I had to get children to shtickle about, I don't know if it's a big deal or not. And what happened was, he poured them wine. That's what it was. He poured them wine. And it's like, I should say cheap, 10% alcohol wine. And I said, one of my sons was 10 years old. I said to him, he doesn't need it. So what do you mean? You have to have it because the Gemara says in Pesachim that there's a mitzvah of simcha. Now, in the time of Beis Hamikdash, you ate Shamis Simcha. The Gemara says that first day Sukkot is a Shabbos, you can't eat Shamis Simcha. Why can't you eat Shamis Simcha? Because you can't shecht it on Shabbos. So what do? You have to have wine. So therefore, you have to drink a cup of wine every single day of Pesach and Sukkot. So you makbid. How many people here are makbid to drink every single day of Pesach a cup of wine, a whole cup of wine? You makbid every day a cup of wine. And the Musa Kazai Sabit. Why not?
I thought wine was the
Are you makbid, Gersh? A cup of wine. Says Tosfos in Moed Cotton Yudala Damut Beis. I read it out. Miu Niveli, top Tosfos. The Simcha Serega that we do Abonon, the Samachta Vishami Simcha Tisvech Hagiga. Tosfos Paskins that really the Gemara over here does not mean it correctly. That means really you cannot do Simcha nowadays because at the end of the day we've got no Shami Simcha. And the whole mitzvah is only to Abonon, not saying still an Indian to drink a cup of wine, but it's to Abonon, not to Raisa according to Tosfos. According to that, it puts the chiyuv much less, but still. That's Tosfos, very short Tosfos, that should be. Mishnah Broad talks about it in the end of Hilchos Yom Tov, big avichs in the Tosfos thing. Tosfos, and it's still you got the Dilsh Mishnah Broad nowadays. I'll read out some of the things. Kosav B'Yashiv, Bakshah that every day of Yom Tov, you have to drink a revius of wine. It says in B'Yashiv, and if you drink grape juice, you're not Yotza. Because grape juice is not Mesamach. And he adds, says Mishnah Broad, Bialocha, and it's Ketzim Mesamcham. Ba'anoshim, is much Beis Hamikdash Sheikayim. If you've got Beis Hamikdash this Pesach, what will you eat to be happy? Shami Simcha, very good. It's a Vachta Shlomim, Bochalta. When there's no Beis Hamikdash, you have to drink wine. Bosa in Chayvalech Elachshov. You're not Mechuyav. But the Maisei says, many poets could say that you have to have bosa as well. This is Machlikas, whether you have to have bosa every day and yain every day. So, and he brings over here from a B'Yashiv that for women you have to buy new clothes. And he says, What happens if you?
Not every day, right?
I'm not telling my wife.
What he says? What happens if? What happens? He says, listen to. I'm reading out to you the words, not me. What happens if she says to you, I don't need any clothes? Doesn't help.
Then you got simcha.
Show the halachas. Now you've lost a bit. And they listen to this. The Chutshani writes that you're mechuyev to buy new clothes even if she says, I don't need it.
It's not every day, though.
No, every
Just
day.
for you.
Take it back.
Right.
And then they say, Judaism some clothes, so
It brings, it brings over here Shaila from Nissim Kavedes and Chutshani. Are you allowed to hit the children on Yom Tov? There's a mitzvah. You're allowed to hit the children on Yom Tov. Mitzvah Simcha. Okay.
The new debate.
If you don't like wine, what's the...
I know. That's my problem. What happens if you tricks out? Once,
Well,
You like
makes
it,
you
You've
happy,
been
you
drinking
know?
that fine, the wine you like.
one time, there was a big asifa in Manchester. One of these lovely soft, and I'd actually seen Ireland because of Corona. It was maybe the I can't remember. So what happened was I had the mazel of walking with the Rosh West time. So I asked him all my questions, like, because I happened to be this. So one of the questions I said to him, if I don't like wine, I'm going to drink a beer, so wine every day. He said, of course you like wine. I said, I don't. So he said to me, you know why you don't like wine? You don't buy the proper stuff. Buy the real good quality wine, and then you'll enjoy it. I said to him, I can't afford it. So that's not an excuse. If it's a mitzvah, so go to the shop. So I said to him, what's the good wine? I asked him, what does he call good wine? He told me a couple of names, but I forgot. I don't enjoy wine so much. Actually, you're right. It's not £10. It's a lot more than £10. Okay, we got completely off the point. But so what happens is my sons, Baruch Hashem, they all makbid every day to drink a cup of wine every day. January. What?
Bring it in for the next year.
Says the Gemara. So now we have another version, which is the opposite of the previous version. Previous version was that what if you shech the korban shlomim on erev Pesach, you're not yotze Shabbos Simcha. Because of Ovi Nomar Belos, Shom Shofte Be'ev Yom Tov, yotze Ben Mishma Simcha. You are yotze Simcha. Ein Ben Mishma Chagiga. Yotze Mishma Simcha. Lebyan Zvichu Shas Simcha. Lebyan Mishma Chagiga. Adova Shebachayva. That you have to bring a Shami Chagiga. V'chadova Shebachayva. Lebyan Machumim. Since you have to bring a Shami Chagiga, you can't be yotze with a korban which was already designated to something else. Now the Gemara is going to have the exact same Gemara, but the other way around. Meisvi. You might have said you have to be Misabach first night. My time you've got nothing to be happy with. Look. The Tanya. That means what the Gemara before wants me as a proof. Here the Gemara asks a question. Now here the Gemara says that you know mitzvah simcha first night sukkahs. Why no mitzvah? The reason is because you can't shech the korban erev Yom Tov. And according to you that you can, there should be a mitzvah simcha on the first night. Says, well, no, you're right. There would be a mitzvah simcha. The reason there isn't a mitzvah simcha is simply because it's not preceded. There's no days of simcha before. So it comes out there's nothing to do where the sham is simcha. It's to do the different reasons. So it comes out you have to, that there is a mitzvah simcha the last night of Sukkot, and as Tosha says, every night of Yom Tov, with the exception of the first night Yom Tov. Now, is also, by the way, if you forget Yalev Yovoy on the first night Sukkot, Kivega talks about it, the chur that you don't have to repeat Shmoneh, because repeat benching, because there's no mitzvah of simcha. Kivega clears about it. Okay. Omav Kana, what? Yisroel is not to do simcha, but Omav Kana. Minayne Mui Chagigas Chamisha Shifson in Berlin. That means the Chagigas Chamisha. When do you sacrifice Chagigas Chamisha? On the 15th, the first day of Pesach, except if it's a Shabbos. Don't leave it over till the morning. The next pasuk says, the two psukim have nothing to do with each other. One pasuk says, there's the Issa of Baal Tolin. The Issa of Baal Tolin is that you're not allowed to leave over the limbs of your korbanos off the fire. You have to sacrifice on that day. The next pasuk says, with some bikurim, rachis. But since the Torah puts it together, you can miss out the full stop in between, and you can read it like this: until the first morning. So from here we learn that every single korban you're not allowed to do Baal Tolin more than one night. And the Tosfos says, like the very, very short Tosfos, but although it's quoted many places, it's very strange. You think about such a Yisroel halacha. If you bring a chatos or oila, how long have you got to sacrifice? Everybody knows how long you got to eat it. We say it every day in Yisroel. I hope you noticed B'chametz this morning. Yes, the B'chametz. Anyway, but everybody knows how long you got to eat it. But how long you got to sacrifice it? It's our Gemara over here. It tells us you have to sacrifice it. It means, let's say, for example, you bring a shlomim, a chatos, you have to sacrifice the imurim before the first morning. Says the Gemara, remember that boiker rishon. It means the first morning. Remember that boiker rishon. The teacher is the first morning. Maskef Yosef. Tama the kosav reishis, the kosav reishis. I mean, my boiker sheni. Had the Torah not said the word reishis straight afterwards, what would you have said? At boiker means the second morning, which is like 2 days later. That means that's Shecht on the 15th, not the 16th, but the 17th. The meat is possible at night. Work it out. You shech the korban chagiga on the 15th of Pesach. You're allowed to eat a korban chagiga for 2 days and 1 night. So you can eat it the whole 15th, the night between the 15th and the 16th, and the 16th. If you say that Baltolin of the Imurim is the morning of the 17th, it comes out that you've got an extra night on the Imurim, the 16th, between the 16th and the 17th. And that can't possibly be that the Imurim which go on the Mizbeach, which are more Kodesh than the meat, you've got a longer period of time to burn them than to eat the korban. Again, the Torah says don't leave it over till the morning. So what it says, how do we know it means the first morning? Because next one says Veishis. What do you mean because it says Veishis? Even if it wouldn't say Veishis, you would know it's the first morning, because otherwise it would come out, you only have to burn it on the 17th morning. And when do you have to stop eating it? By the 16th night. So therefore it does can't be. Says maybe why not? That when do you not allowed to eat korban Pesach from Chatzos? You have to eat korban Pesach by Chatzos. When the limbs you got all the way to the morning. So therefore you see what korban Pesach. Yes, the more normal kodesh korban Pesach, and nevertheless you've got a longer time period to burn the more than you have on the korban Pesach. Rabbi Yosef had a different question. The Beis, which we're going to quote in a minute, doesn't dash in the word rashis, and without the word rashis, it translates the word boika as meaning first morning. That means whenever the Torah says boika morning, which morning does it mean? It says rather from the next Beis, which we're going to explain in a minute, it is clear that the word boika always means the first morning, not the next morning. So then why do you need the drosha of rashis without the word drosha, without the Torah saying the word rashis? If the Torah just said, at boika, I would already know it means morning. Why does it need the word rashis? That's the kasha of the Gemara. Mahi, what's this Beis? The Tanya. We're going to have a Beis now, which at the beginning sounds very puzzling, and we have to first explain it. And once we finish explaining it, we will see that this is a kasha that without the word rashis, boika means morning. This Beis is discussing the halachas of chagigas arboso. Chagigas arboso. The chagiga which is bought before Pesach. And how long have you got to eat it? Does anybody know how long you got to eat the chagigas arboso? Oh, between who and who? Ben Tema and everybody else. Ben Tema says you've got till when? Till Chatzos. The Chacham say very good. It's interesting. There's people talk about it this morning. Somebody forgot about it. According to Ben Tema, you've only got till Chatzos. According to the Chacham, it's like a normal shlom. You've got 2 days and 1 night. This Beis holds like the Chacham. That's just a direct quotation from a pasuk. Rashi says this pasuk is talking about Chagigas Arbosa, and Rashi says it must be talking about Chagigas Arbosa. How do I know it's about Chagigas Arbosa? Anybody want to prove it? Look at the pasuk again. Lo yolin, you mustn't leave over Nabosa Shetisbach. That means the limbs. For erev, you mustn't leave it over to the morning. How do you know it about Chagigas Arbosa? For erev, very good. If it's Chagigas Chamishah, so when do you sacrifice Chagigas Chamishah? So all day. You don't want to leave it for the night. You want to as early as possible. It's only the Chagiga of Arbosa, which you're doing it with the korban Pesach, that it makes sense to say Bo'er. So we're talking about Chagigas Arbosa. Says the Beis, limit, another from the Beis top line, the limit of Chagigas Arbosa shenecheles l'shlamim laylach. The pasuk says 2 days and 1 night. Why? Because it says boika, and boika, the Brisa understands means the second morning. Why? Because why does it mean? Because it says Beis la boika. The Brisa understands that boika is the 16th. So you shech your Shabbos on the 14th, and the boika is the 16th. Oh yeah, no. Maybe boika means the 15th. And then when it says that boika means the 15th morning, it says the Brisa no. Since it says the word since it says la yom harishon, the whole day, and then afterwards la boika after, it must be the second one because it says don't leave over asher tizbach b'erev by yom harishon the whole day la boika on the following morning. So we see it must be the 16th. It can't be the 15th. So therefore you've got to eat the chagiga for 2 days, 1 night. Says well, then the Beis asks again, and Rashi says more later is going to obviously ask us. You just explained that Bayim Rishon La Boika has to be the 16th. It can't be the 15th. Otherwise, why does it say Bayim Rishon? It could have just stopped by saying La Boika. The fact that it says Bayim Rishon La Boika must be saying the 16th. Or we're going to have another drash which the Beis hasn't told us, which tells us that generally Chagiga is 2 days and 1 night. Chutz v'zu is not talking about Chagiga Saboso. Could be. The Torah teaches elsewhere that Chagiga is eaten for 2 days and 1 night. But maybe it's not about Chagiga Saboso. Because when the Pasuk says, Im neida in the dovo, limit al Chagiga Saboso, shenecheles t'shneyom v'layla echad. The Torah says, neida in the dovo, that shlomim, you eat it for 2 days and 1 night. The word im there is spare. Could have said, neida in the dovo. Im, if, is to add, that Chagiga is also bought 2 days and 1 night. Okay. We're going to examine this Brisa. The Brisa starts off, we're talking about Chagiga Saboso. And the Brisa starts off by saying they can eat it for 2 days, 1 night. Says the Brisa, maybe not. Maybe only 1 day and 1 night. Says the Brisa, that the Pasuk says, Bayom Harishon La Boika. If I want to say to you, don't leave it till the morning, I just say, don't leave it till the morning. If I say, don't leave it over the day and then the morning, what I mean is the whole day plus another morning, which means the whole of the next day plus the morning. So obviously it means 2 days and 1 night. Then the Brisa goes back and says, maybe not. Maybe it's the first morning. The Pasuk must be saying the second morning. Otherwise, right, you have to say, it could have just said La Boika. The Brisa means to ask the following question. If you turn over the page, or if you've got the Pasuk on the page, the Pasuk could be telling us 2 completely different halachas. One is the halachas of Chagigas Saboso, and one is the Chagigas Chamishosa. Achas Chagigas Saboso, achas Chamishosa. V'zula boika, v'zula boika. Let's read the pasuk how the Gemara understands it, how it could be understood. Lo yolim min habosa shetisbach bo'erev. Don't leave over the korban which you left, which you shechted that night. That is a Chagigas Saboso you shechted at night. Don't leave over. Normal leaving over is the next morning. So how long would you be allowed to eat Chagigas Saboso according to this logic so far? Just the night. Very good. Just that night. I want that to be clear. Lo yolin, don't leave over till the next morning. That means you can only eat it that night, and that's it. By Yom Harishon, the next Chagiga, which you're going to shecht on the first day of Pesach, La Boika is for the morning. How long can you eat Chagigas Chamishosa then? That morning, 1 day only. Because again, each one is saying, look, let's read the pasuk again. If the word is like this, let's go through the Beis slowly. The Beis says that Chagigas Saboso can eat it for 2 days and 1 night. Because it says, La Yom Harishon La Boika, which is a long way around the same next morning, tell you another morning. Fine. It says the Beis, maybe not. But what do you mean, maybe not? You just said La Yom Harishon La Boika. Explains the Gemara, maybe not means, maybe not, maybe the Torah over here is talking about 2 separate kabbanos, teaching us that each one, you're only allowed to eat it that day and that's it. And you read the pasuk like this. Lo yolim min habosa, the flesh, the meat, asher tisbach bo'erev, don't leave it over for the morning, i.e., the Chagigas Saboso can only be eaten that night and that's it. By Yom Harishon, whatever you shecht on the first day, meaning Chagigas Chamishosa, La Boika, you've got till the next morning, meaning you've only got 1 day and that's it. Once the next morning dawns, you've got to get rid of it. Maybe that's pshat in the pasuk. Says the Gemara, can't be. Why not? Hoda Oma, says the Beis, and no. And the Kaimel on the Chagiga Necheles L'Shomim Laila Echad, Im Kain Im Neido Neidavo B'Mai. That we know that the word Im Neidim Nedava teaches us that Chagiga can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. Which Chagiga is it talking about? Chagiga is Tesvov. Again, Chagiga is Abasa, Ksipa Yom V'Layla. Just that night, Chagiga is Tesvov, Ksipa Yom V'Layla. So it's impossible, because if you're going to say the Chagigas Yudalet is 1 day and the Chagigas Chamisha also is 1 day, when are you ever going to have a Chagiga for 2 days and 1 night? So God says, Elo Haile Chagigas Tesvov. So that pasuk, that which says in Baso, in Neidim Nedava, is telling us the 15th. That Chagigas Chamisha so can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. Once that pasuk is telling us that you can eat a Chagigas Chamisha for 2 days and 1 night, we are no longer able to explain by Yom Rishon LaBoika as referring to a different Chagiga to teach us that the Chagigas Chamisha also is only 1 day. Since we no longer can explain that by Yom Rishon LaBoika is about Chamisha also Chagiga, so by Yom Rishon LaBoika is going back on the Chagigas Abasa. If it's going back to Chagigas Abasa, how long are you allowed to eat Chagigas Abasa for? 2 days and 1 night. Because if you say by Yom Rishon LaBoika is going back to Chagigas Abasa, you can't be there that night and the next morning, because it says by Yom Rishon LaBoika. And if I only want to tell you to eat in the morning, it's just a LaBoika. So what says, and that pasuk, full stop. So now we understand the Beis. So very briefly, the Beis says you can eat it for 2 days, 1 night. The proof being it says that and that is a long expression to explain next day. And the most Beis suggests maybe not, and the more explains the suggestion is maybe the possible about 2 different chagigas, Yudad and Tesvav, but each one's only 1 day. If that's the case, the Torah says in Neidim Nedava, which tells us that Chagiga can be eaten for 2 days, would never work, not by either. Elamais for 2 days. Says the Gemara, at the end of the day, only because the Torah told us a long way around of saying by Yomishna Boika. The my Boika Boika Sheni, Okolech the Boika Stoma Boika Vishon. Had the Torah said nothing would be Boika Vishon. That means whenever the Torah says Boika, what does it mean? The first morning. So when the Torah says Lo Yolin Chilev Chagi at Boika, what does it mean? The first morning. So how do we know that you're not allowed to do Baltolin of the Murim of all Korbanos till the first morning? Not because the next pasuk straight away says the word Rashis, but simply because of the fact it says Boika. Boika means the very first morning, unless it says Boima Rishonah Boika. Starting a new topic completely, and this has got to do with called the Torah B'Dvar Mitzvah. Normally, if a person doesn't have Bein on Shabbos, if he does it b'Meizid, it's Chayav Koros Askina. If he does it b'Shegi, what does he do? Chafas. There's a special dispensation called Torah B'Dvar Mitzvah, meaning if a person is very, very busy trying to do a mitzvah, and in the process he did an Aveira by mistake, then he's not even a Chayav Achatos. Does anybody remember where we had it last? Yes, but yeah, which Sugi in Shabbos? Shabbos. When did we have it in Shabbos? Maybe you should remember it. Yes, Bismillah. If you do a Bismillah of a baby on a Shabbos, when you really shouldn't have done it to Shabbos, it's the wrong day, very good. And that's the Gemara going to repeat that sugya. So, but the Gemara, the Mishnah limits it that you have to at least be trying to do a Korban Pesach, and it has to be that the Korban is epis a mitzvah. If you, for example, go on Shabbos and you decide to shake a chveis, you got to shake this Shabbos, shech the Korban Pesach, then there's no meaning to it. Not Torah B'Dvar Mitzvah. So what were you thinking of even shech the Korban Pesach? That limitation is very complicated. How far it's limited. That means, let's say, for example, you shech the Shlomim on Pesach, because we're talking about Erev Pesach, which is the Shabbos. Really, this whole page is about Erev Pesach, which is the Shabbos. And what happens is Erev Pesach, which is the Shabbos, and then you go and you shech the wrong korban. So then you're in the realms. The question is, the limitations is quite difficult. So we're splitting hairs over here. I shouldn't say split hair, but it's like splitting hairs to work out when is it called a Torah B'Dvar Mitzvah and it's not Torah B'Dvar Mitzvah. That's the problem. Says the Mishnah, a Pesach shechta Shloi Lishmo b'Shabbos. You take a Korban Pesach and you decide I'm going to shecht it, let's say Shloi Lishmo. What's Shloi Lishmo mean? Shlomi. Oila. The Shabbos Chayav of Chatis to Chayav Chatis. Why is it not Torah B'Dvar Mitzvah? What do you want to suggest? The answer is, what is he shechting the Korban Pesach for? For Shlomim. So when he's busy shechting, he's right. Had he said it's a Korban Pesach, it'd be wonderful. He'd be doing a mitzvah, a wonderful mitzvah. Shechting Korban Pesach on Shabbos is a huge mitzvah. We said the Moyada is pushes off Shabbos. But over here, he went to do it L'Shem Shlomim. So what in the world were you thinking? You're not even trying to do mitzvah. You're doing L'Shem Shlomim Chayav Chatas. The Shalkol Azvachim, any other common, let's say take a Shlomim on Oila Shachtan Hashem Pesach, if they're not fitting, for example, let's say it's a cow, let's say it's a sheep in the right age, even though, let's say, for example, El Pesach, you took a sheep which was designated to be a shlom, and you shechted l'shem Pesach. So here we're getting quite close to l'shem mitzvah. So Rabbi says Yechav Chatos. He does not hold the Torah mitzvah. Bishua Poita, Bishua says no. You were trying to shech the Korban Pesach, even though you took a shlom. Let's say, for example, you bring to Beis Hamikdash a Shamei Chagiga, and I see the Shamei Chagiga walking around the Beis Hamikdash, and I think to myself, oh, probably it's for Pesach, and I checked it for Pesach. He'll be thrilled with me. Now you got to find yourself another Shamei Chagiga, another Shamei Surcha. But regardless, I have intended to do a mitzvah. So therefore, now the Gemara Mishnah brings back and forth an argument from Rabbi Bishra. I prove it to you that you're wrong. How can I prove? If you shech the Korban Pesach on Erev Pesach, which is a Shabbos, you done a mitzvah or not? Done a mitzvah. But if you shech the Korban Pesach for a Shlomim on Erev Pesach, that means the Korban Pesach, which if you did it right, would be good. But if you get it wrong, you're chayav chatos, because you agree as well. Zvachim, other kabbalas like your shami simcha or your shlomim or your oil, whatever it is. Shenasuin lishmon. If you shecht it lishmoy of the oil or the shlomim, then everybody agrees you chayav chatos because you've done a normal avir. Kishashinu lishmon, where it's doubly wrong. First of all, if it would be right, it would be wrong, and here you did it even wrong, and you didn't share chayav. Of course, you'd be chayav chatos. You can't compare. Almost with Pesach, also you change your mind to do it for something which is forbidden. Again, if you shech the Korban Pesach on Erev Shabbos with the intention to do it as shlomim, I can understand your chayv chatos because you've taken it away from a Pesach to a shlomim. If you shech the shlomim for Pesach, you're pushing it in the right direction. So therefore, you're pot from chatos again. Rabbi Lezer says to Rabbi Yeshua, if a Korban Pesach, which you should be shechting, but if you get it for the wrong reason, you have chatos. Other kabbalas that you shouldn't be shechting, if you get it for the wrong reason, you should be chayav chatos. Says Abishad, no, you can't compare. Pesach, when you shecht it for the wrong call, but you're shechting it in the wrong direction, you're trying to change Pesach to Shlomim, so of course you're chayav chatos. The Shlomim here, you're shechting the same Pesach, you're trying to draw it in the right direction, so you're part of. Every single Shabbos, you have to bring Karbonos Tzibur. What Karbonos Tzibur do you have to bring every single Shabbos? The Musaf and the Korban Tomit. So every single Shabbos, you have to bring 4 Karbonos. Shein Mutoyin Lishmon, V'ashech Lishmon Chayv. If you take a Chatos and you shecht it on Shabbos thinking that this is a Korban Tomit or a Musaf of Shabbos, everybody agrees that you Chayv Chatos. Even Rabbi Shua. Said Rabbi Lezer, what's the difference between shechting a shlomim on Shabbos l'shem musaf to shechting a shlomim on Pesach Shem Pesach? Can anybody guess the answer? Again, if you go on Shabbos, you shecht a shlomim l'shem Korban Tomit chayav chatos in Kol Tov Yishua. If you shecht a shlomim on Pesach l'shem Pesach, you potter. Says Amar Rabbi Yishua, look, im Amos bemoed sibur sheish nem kitzvah. There's a fixed amount. That means everybody knows there's 4 korbanos you have to bring: 2 Tomit, 2 musaf. Timah Pesach shein ne kitzvah. Rashi explains that even if I've already been yotzim a Korban Pesach, everybody knows that Pesach, there's millions of Korban Pesach. I see a sheep roaming around. What do I think to myself? That it's Korban Pesach because there's so many to be bought. So therefore, there's no limitation. So therefore, however many there is, there's always more than you need to bring. So therefore, I'm always told mitzvah mitzvah. I'm trying to do a mitzvah. Rameir holds that you're always part of it. Rameir is more makon even than Rabbi Yeshua, because he says even that's a Torah mitzvah. Now, says the Mishnah, if you shecht the Korban Pesach for people not planning to eat it or not planning to be on designated, but it's me and people haven't done Bismillah Tom, even Rabbi Yeshua says Yechav Chatos. Why? Why Yechav? Oh, why not Torah mitzvah? So here again, what?
Never right.
Because it's never right. So it's possible that he should have known. When you shecht a shlomim, you see a shlomim, you think you're shechting a Pesach, fine. So you made a mistake. Here, you're shechting it for Avedim. That you should be aware of, and that's not Torah mitzvah. The reason in all these 4 cases you're potter is because indeed it's a kosher Korban Pesach. Because we said earlier that if you shecht Korban Pesach for those who eat it and those who don't, but to men and those who are Torah, it's a kosher Korban Pesach. So of course you're potter, because you've actually shechted a good Korban Pesach. Shochtav nimsa Baal Mum, it's got blemish chayv. Why is he chayv? A Baal Mum is something which is on the outside. It's missing an eye. So then you could have looked at it. Why did you shech the Korban Pesach without even checking it out? Shochtav nimsa Shreifa B'seisa Potter. Why? Because how should I have known? I thought I was shechting. Shochtav, if you shecht it when the owners changed their minds, or the owners died, or became Tomid Potter. They should shochet b'shus, we shouldn't say even Rabbi Lezer's Potter. Why? Because here you couldn't possibly have known. So there's 3 levels. There are levels which Rabbi Shua says you're chayav because you could have definitely known. That's like shechting a Pesach l'shem shlamim or something. There's levels which even Rabbi Lezer says you're Potter. For example, if the owners died, you couldn't know. There's an argument, and that is a shlam shech l'shem Pesach. Very quickly on Purim this year is a Friday. Tanis Esther, I was speaking to myself earlier. Tanis Esther there's a mincha and there's Mariv. Mariv is about 6:23 or something. So we're considering doing the shir between mincha and Mariv. We're finishing 5 minutes before Mariv to give everybody a chance to go to their designated minyan. Unless people have a preference at different time, I don't know what other time to do. Maybe before mincha, people will be quite busy to live. What? You're talking about Thursdays. Between mincha and Mariv. Once you hear the Megillah, you need to go home with your wife to the Megillah, and then afterwards. What? If anybody's right, the Shaila is the next morning. Yeah. Won't be normal. The question is the next morning, there's a big problem. There's a next minyan and there's the 8 o'clock minyan. Oh, last year, this year we can't do it in between. There's no time between the 2 minyanim. There's no time. So therefore, I thought to do it Friday night. Sofa thought that after Purim and everybody gets his shikha, Friday night. The problem is to do it before nets. It's very, very early. Well, and then to do it after nets, it clashes with Shachris. So anybody's got suggestions? I was thinking Friday night. What? No time at all. No time at all.
Thursday night. That should be free.
Can everybody decide as quickly as possible and please let somebody know? Do it quickly. Do you mind?
I can never get it. I never get it anyway.
Where can you do it? You must remember here there's ready to be done. If you say
as long as someone can remind me to get it, I can never get it.
Last year we did it between the 2 shachris, between the nets and the later one. But this year they're making the second one early because it's a Friday. So before nets is quite early. And I mean quite tight. You must remember you spent all night.
Why do it Friday night after meal?
That's what I said. Friday night after the meal.
Friday night after meal.
Oh, you don't count. I don't know if you get a vote.
There's a normal say to get Friday.